If you love that shiver running up your spine and enjoy mysterious stories that mess with your head, then make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Today, I bring you a chilling tale that will make you think twice before taking an unknown shortcut. The story of Lucas, a truck driver who got lost on a road that everyone avoids, will keep you on the edge of your seat from start to finish. Ready to feel the silence of the abandoned road? Let's dive in.
Para tudo aí!
But before continuing with the video, take a look at our sponsor moment. GoLogin is the best site for creating multiple accounts, whether it's Google, Gmail, Facebook, and more. Chapter 1. The beginning of the journey. Lucas was known among his fellow truck drivers as a man of few words and strict discipline. He didn't believe in superstitions, let alone the stories that circulated at rest stops. Tales of cursed roads, ghosts, and nighttime apparitions always seemed exaggerated to him, mere fabrications created by lonely men on long trips. He trusted the asphalt and logic. However, that day, everything changed. He had left a small town in the countryside early in the morning, carrying a load of appliances to a destination several hours away. The day was clear, and the weather was perfect for a long drive. Everything seemed to be going well until, halfway through the route, the GPS indicated a change of course. A serious accident on the main road was blocking traffic, and the system suggested a detour. Lucas hesitated for a moment. He didn't know that alternate road, but he trusted the GPS. It'll just be a shortcut, he thought. Yet something in the automatic suggestion made him uneasy. That road, marked as São Pedro Road on the map, had never appeared in his routes before, and he had traveled that path many times. Still, not wanting to delay the delivery, he followed the recommendation. As he left the main highway and entered the secondary road, the clear sky began to darken. Gray clouds took over the horizon, and a sense of discomfort began to settle in Lucas's chest. The scenery around him also changed. The open plains and farms gave way to dense forests that seemed to swallow the road. The radio crackled, and there was no cell signal. The only company was the sound of the tires on the asphalt and the oppressive silence of the road. The first few kilometers were uneventful, but gradually, he noticed that the road seemed narrower and more poorly maintained. The trees closed in on the path, forming a tunnel of twisted branches. And then, on the horizon, he saw something that puzzled him, a rusty sign. It was so worn by time that the letters were barely legible, but Lucas could make out the name Abandoned Road. He didn't remember seeing that on the GPS. Chapter 2. The first sign. With the rain starting to fall lightly, Lucas decided it would be better to press on than to turn back. After all, it was just a secondary road, right? He accelerated a little, trying to make up for the delay that was beginning to accumulate. However, as he advanced, the road grew increasingly inhospitable. The trees, now taller and denser, blocked any natural light, and the darkening sky contributed to the feeling of complete isolation. The silence was absolute, except for the sound of the rain hitting the windshield and the roar of the engine. Then something unusual happened. The dashboard began to flicker. The lights, which had always worked perfectly, began to dim and brighten erratically, as if there were a short circuit. Lucas tried to adjust the controls, but nothing seemed to solve the problem. He turned off the radio, thinking it might be an electrical issue, but the static persisted. The truck was clearly malfunctioning, but the road was deserted, with no gas stations or other vehicles in sight. Then, a strange sound filled the cabin. It was a whisper, almost imperceptible but clearly audible in the absolute silence of the road. "Get out of here," the voice seemed to say. Lucas froze. He looked around, but there was no one there. The radio was off. The only logical explanation would be that his mind was playing tricks on him due to exhaustion, but the tone of that whisper felt too real to ignore. He decided to brush off what he had just heard and continued driving, even though his heart was racing. but the discomfort was growing. Lucas glanced at the rearview mirror more often, as if expecting to see something or someone there. The feeling of being watched intensified with every kilometer. Then he noticed something truly bizarre. The clock on the dashboard had stopped. 3:33 a.m. At first, he thought it was just another electrical problem. But when he looked at his wristwatch, he realized it was also frozen at 3:33 a.m. Lucas tried to dismiss the chill that ran down his spine. The road seemed to stretch endlessly ahead, and no matter how far he drove, he didn't see any significant change in the landscape. It was as if he were trapped in a loop, always returning to the same point. Chapter 3. The Apparition on the Road. As Lucas advanced down the deserted road, something caught his eye. The rain made it difficult to see, but there, ahead, in the middle of the road, stood a figure. He slowed the truck, trying to understand what was happening. The figure stood completely still, staring directly at the truck. Lucas reduced his speed to nearly a stop, the headlights illuminating the figure. It was a man, or at least it seemed to be. Dressed in a long, dark cloak, his face obscured by the shadow of a hood. Lucas hesitated. He had never seen anyone out there, not on maps, not in traffic reports. The road was completely deserted, so what was this man doing there, in the middle of nowhere? The most logical thing would be to help, to ask if he needed a ride or assistance, but something in his gut told him not to roll down the window, not to get out of the truck. The man remained motionless, not making any sign. Lucas's heart raced, and he decided that the best course of action was to move on. He pressed the accelerator slowly, hoping the figure would step aside. But as the truck advanced, the figure did not budge. Just as Lucas decided to speed up, the figure simply vanished. It was as if it had been swallowed by the darkness or by the road itself. The shock almost made Lucas lose control of the steering wheel. He looked back through the rearview mirror, expecting to see the figure still there, but there was no one. The fear began to grip his mind. He knew something was terribly wrong with that road, but he still had no idea what was coming. Chapter 4. The Absolute Isolation. Lucas felt a weight in the air, as if the environment around him was growing denser. The silence was so profound that he could hear his own heart pounding. The rain continued to fall, but strangely, the sound of the water seemed muffled. The feeling of being watched didn't fade, even though he was completely alone. The radio, which had only been emitting static occasionally, went silent. He looked around, searching for something to explain what was happening. No signs, no other vehicles. Just the road, the dark sky, and the trees closing in. But then, from the corner of his eye, he saw something. A faint light, far away, deep in the dense forest. His logical mind told him to keep going, not to lose focus, but the urge to investigate that light overcame him. He parked the truck on the shoulder and got out, feeling the cold cutting through his skin as the raindrops hit him heavily. With a flashlight in hand, he started walking towards the light. The closer he got, the more the light flickered. It looked weak, like a candle flame being whipped by the wind. When Lucas finally arrived at the source of the light, he found a small cabin, old and apparently abandoned. The light came from within, through a broken window. Chapter 5. The Mystery Unveiled. The small cabin seemed to be collapsing under the weight of the years. The wooden boards creaked under the touch of the wind, and the windows were covered in dust and spider webs. Lucas hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should really enter. His instincts screamed for him to return to the truck, but curiosity, and the sense that something was drawing him in, pushed him forward. He walked up to the door, which was ajar. With a loud creak, he slowly pushed it open, revealing the interior of the cabin. The smell of mold and old wood filled the air. Inside, the faint light he had seen from afar came from a nearly melted candle placed on a rustic wooden table. It was strange because the place appeared to have been abandoned for a long time, yet the candle was lit. Someone, or something, had been there recently. Lucas took a few hesitant steps onto the creaking floor. On the opposite wall, there was a shelf filled with various objects, rusty cans, an old lantern, and a notebook. The notebook looked new, in stark contrast to the rest of the cabin, as if it had been placed there on purpose. Lucas approached it, and without thinking too much, he opened the notebook. What he saw made him recoil instantly. The pages were filled with the same sentence repeated hundreds of times: "You shouldn't be here." The letters were written hastily, some words nearly illegible, as if someone had written it in a state of desperation. However, the last page had something different, a drawing. It was a crude sketch of a human figure, shrouded in shadows, with empty eyes and an outstretched hand, as if about to grab whoever was reading. Fear seized Lucas. He let the notebook drop and stepped back toward the door, but before he could escape, he heard something. A sound that froze his blood. Footsteps. Heavy, slow, as if something large was moving above him. Lucas looked up at the ceiling, his heart racing. Whoever was there was about to descend. The floor above him creaked with each step, and the feeling that something horrible was about to happen immobilized him. With one last burst of courage, he bolted from the cabin, not daring to look back. The door slammed shut behind him, echoing in the oppressive silence of the road. Lucas ran as fast as he could through the muddy field until he reached the truck. His hands trembled as he tried to open the door, and finally, he managed to get inside. The engine roared to life as if the truck had been waiting for him. He sped away, fleeing from the cabin and that cursed road. But even as he drove, he felt he wasn't alone. The cabin seemed to be behind him, always present, like a shadow following him, even if it was out of sight. The radio crackled back to life, but Lucas was so focused on getting away that he barely paid attention. Chapter 6. The circle never closes. After what felt like hours, Lucas finally reached a paved road. The feeling of relief washed over him, but the fear still gripped every part of his body. He had escaped, but something inside him knew that the experience was far from over. The road he had left behind felt more like a portal to something beyond his comprehension. A shadow that, somehow, still lingered over him. He found a brightly lit gas station on the side of the road. The glow of the neon lights and the movement of the attendants inside briefly calmed him. He parked the truck and stepped out to get some fresh air. Upon entering the convenience store, the old attendant behind the counter watched him with curiosity. "Are you okay, buddy?" the man asked, noticing Lucas's pale and disturbed expression. Lucas briefly recounted what had happened: the road, the figure, the cabin. He hoped the man would laugh it off or say it was just fatigue, but the response was a long silence. The attendant stared at Lucas with serious, calculating eyes, as if assessing every word. "The road of Sao Pedro, you took a wrong turn, didn't you?" the old man finally said. "Many have passed through there, but not all return. Those who do return changed." Lucas felt the dread return in full force. "What do you mean by that? What was that figure on the road?" The attendant shook his head, looking away for a moment, as if pondering whether he should share something. "I don't know what you saw, but everyone who travels that road ends up being followed. It doesn't matter where you go or how long you stay. They find you. Whatever is out there, it never lets you go completely." Lucas tried to process what the man was saying, but his mind refused to accept it. He grabbed the keys to the truck and, without saying another word, hurriedly left the store. When he returned to the road, something disturbing happened. The radio, which had been silent since he left the cabin, crackled to life again. The same static he had heard before, followed by that low, whispering voice. "You shouldn't be here." His heart raced. Looking in the rearview mirror, he saw something that almost made him lose control of the steering wheel. There, in the back seat of the truck, was the same figure he had seen in the middle of the road. Standing still, motionless, its empty eyes fixed on his neck. Lucas screamed, but the scream was lost in the echo of the silent night. And then, the clock on the dashboard stopped again, 3:33 a.m. This time, he knew the circle would never close. He was trapped in that nightmare, forever. And now I ask you, what would you do if you were in Lucas's place? Would the road let you move on, or would it trap you forever? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling stories. Until next time, with more mysteries to keep you awake at night.